On March 31st, 2023, a semi-truck trailer exploded, sending the roof 50 feet into the air. I sat down with Battalion Chief Clay Hendon from Birmingham Fire and Rescue in Alabama to uncover what happened on scene.
Engine 13, which is the closest proximity station, the first due in to this incident, got dispatched on just a truck fire. They responded along. Two engine companies responded. They were the first ones on scene. And when they got on scene, they discovered that they had not just a truck fire, but an explosive event with a van carrier. Fortunately for us, they are part of our Special Operations Battalion, and they've trained on lithium batteries for probably a year prior to this incident, so they were familiar with it. The engine officer got on scene, they did a 360, discovered what they had, and it was lithium batteries, and they upgraded the call to a hazmat call with a full response.
That's what a lot of people don't realize is we get dispatched to something, and it might be something completely different.
Right.
In this case, you thought you had a truck fire.
Correct.
Did you think it was actually a semi-truck on fire or like a pickup truck at that point?
So because it came from this was a truck stop, so
Okay.
they had a pretty good idea that it was going to be a motor carrier, an 18-wheeler, when they got dispatched. But when they got there and discovered the actual event that they had, it was significantly larger than just a truck fire,
Right.
which we deal with pretty frequently on the interstate coming through town because we have so many interstates come through. But the impact of this incident when they got there is the trailer blew apart, and we had a couple exposure vehicles parked nearby, and we still had fire going when they got there. It was out of the gate, the initial response was escalated quickly when they first got there.
When you look at the pictures, a lot of people, first off, they think it's a flatbed carrier.
Right.
Like this was an actual trailer that exploded. The sides, if you really look close, you can see the sides laying on the ground. And
so they thought that also. So when they pulled up, it did look like a flatbed. It looked like a flatbed who's in the middle of the trailer had collapsed and caved in. As they approached and got a little bit closer and could get a better image, they could see the sides of the van had opened up, and the actual back doors of the trailer were still somewhat vertical. They got blown off also, but they were still attached to the trailer and leaning. There was a significant amount of damage done to the cab of the truck. It broke the windshield out of it, blew the air dam off the roof of the tractor, broke the lot. I mean, it was an impressive explosion. I'm sure we were lucky there wasn't anybody there. And our first thoughts, or 13's first thoughts when they got there, was they thought the driver was asleep in the sleeper cab. That was immediately when they got there, they made entry into the cab of the tractor to make sure he wasn't in there.
yeah.
Because it was a big enough event that had he been in there, he probably would have been injured.
In the back of that was DDR batteries, damaged, defective, recall batteries. They were in barrels. Were they all DDR batteries, or were there some newly manufactured? Or
to my knowledge, there wasn't any new ones in there, and it was really a mixed bag of just various types of batteries. So it was pallet rows of 55-gallon drums. Some were correctly packaged, some were incorrectly packaged. The ones that lit off in this incident were actually the ones that were incorrectly packaged, which caused the incident. After the thermal event and the fire were over and we started mitigating the cleanup, we started looking in the barrels, going through them and determining how they'd been packaged, and really started being able to zero in on what happened with this incident. They had segregated the batteries out. So like one barrel was per se laptop batteries, one barrel was cell phone batteries. So it was like that. But some of them were individually sleeved in bags. Some were in cell blocks, some weren't. It was just a random mixed bag of how all of these were actually packaged up. And the barrels that were involved were not vented DDR barrels. That was part of the issue. That was the off-gassing and the explosion, we think, is probably what caused that.
you only had a few barrels involved, right?
When they first got on scene, we had 2 pallet rows that were involved. So 4 barrels were involved in fire. And then we had 4 additional barrels that were exposure barrels on the next pallet that did have some thermal damage, but they weren't on fire when they got there. We were getting high tick readings on those barrels when they got there. So we took precautions with those just in the event that they did off-gas and light off. But the only fire event we had was the last row of pallets.
From what I can see, you actually removed a row of barrels exposures, so you didn't have additional batteries going into thermal runaway.
Yep.
How did you remove those barrels?
So when we first, the second arriving company got on scene, it was Engine 6 in town. Their captain was riding the seat that day, and he came and met me at the command post when we started really developing a plan on what we were going to do. We already had a hose line deployed, and we weren't flowing water at the time because fortunately 13 knew more of what not to do on these incidents than they did know what to do. So at the time, the fire wasn't going anywhere. It was just these last couple barrels on the trailer, so they didn't engage with it or take an offensive attack. I had Engine 6's officer when they got there. They actually boarded the trailer, and essentially we made a fire break, for lack of a better way to put it. He boarded the trailer, and then one entire pallet row of the barrels we just removed off the trailer, and that gave us a break. At that time, the hose line that they deployed was a blitz nozzle, and we just turned it on these exposure barrels toward the front of the cab, and we just flowed water on those exposure barrels to protect them, and we let the back burn off.
Okay, so the ones you removed, it was just by hand. I mean, I gotta imagine they're fairly heavy.
Quite literally, they just knocked them off the trailer.
Okay.
Just pushed them off because knowing that, damaging them more could have caused, another incident or the incident to escalate, I would rather get those barrels on the ground, get them off the trailer so that we don't have all the exposures burn up and the whole trailer on fire. So
Right.
realizing it could have been a little bit of a bigger incident doing it the way we did, it was better to get them off the trailer and deal with it out in the parking lot than it was to keep it on the trailer with the rest of the mass of the product.
The explosion event itself, luckily nobody was injured.
Right.
It's just incredible, the amount of force, the damage it did, even inside the Flying J.
Mm-hmm. So when we got the scene under control and we started trying to isolate the parking lot to keep everybody away, we had witnesses. Obviously, there was the fuel pumps are pretty close adjacent to where this truck was parked on the property, and there was actually a driver that was out fueling his truck when this happened. And as you can imagine, all of our calls would get in EMS and fire. The bystanders tend to exaggerate a little bit on
Right.
the details, which we're used to. Well, the driver told us that it blew the roof of this trailer about 40 to 50 feet in the air. And we kind of took that as, okay, it probably happened, but he probably exaggerated a little bit.
Right.
We went into the property or into the business to actually notify the manager what had happened, what actions we were taking, what was going on. So we wanted to inform them of what was happening because we were taking over the parking lot. This was a large scale incident at this point when we started having to pull the barrels off. So we needed to let them know. And one of the first things we noticed when we went into the business was the ceiling tiles had been blown out from the drop ceiling when we walked in. So then we got to thinking, okay, the shockwave might have been significant enough that it did blow 40 to 50 feet. Unfortunately for us, where the truck was parked on the property was just out of the pan angle of their security camera. So we weren't able to recover any video from it.
It would have been an impressive video if they had it.
I would have loved to have seen it. And literally, it was just out of the angle of the camera. Just 10 more feet over, and it would have been in it.
Yeah, so that brings up a kind of another thought here is a lot of people don't realize that lithium-ion batteries don't necessarily have to be placarded. And there's a lot of trailers running around with damaged, defective recall batteries that they've got no markings on the outside, so the fire department has no idea. Any markings on this trailer?
This trailer didn't have any placards or anything on it. As a matter of fact, the only reason our engine 13 recognized it was lithium batteries when they got there was because the barrels had the lithium battery stickers on the barrels. If it hadn't been for that, they wouldn't have known what they had. There wasn't any, which obviously the trailer blew apart, so it was opened up.
Right.
But the doors were still on. There was no placards on the doors, or when we started moving some of the sides of the trailer around, there wasn't anything to identify it on it.
The cleanup efforts, I imagine, were very difficult because you can't just keep these barrels and put them on another truck and ship them off. It's still a hazard.
Right.
So there's a lot involved in overpacking these properly.
Sure.
So
So
what's kind of the methodology there?
So we had a plan in place for this incident on the cleanup. So Will Wrecker Service is our local recovery service, and they get all the credit for the cleanup on this. They managed all of it. We were involved to some extent as far as just kind of monitoring and learning about this because it was the first event we had ever had where they had to be repackaged and gone through. But they took care of it. But the process on it was we ended up with, initially it was going to be like a 10-day soak on site to pull all the stranded energy out of the batteries. Thank you. They were going to have to soak them on site. They couldn't be moved. And DOT got there, NTSB, when they all showed up and started telling us what was going to have to be done before these batteries could actually be put on the road to carry somewhere else. We had a good plan in place on what we were going to do because the batteries that weren't involved in the incident, that had no thermal signatures with the tick, we were just going to reload those batteries and get them off site to a safe location. But the federal agencies that got involved didn't want it done that way. They wanted everything unloaded and gone through, which was probably, looking back, was probably the right way to do it to make sure, because we really didn't know what was in the other barrels because we didn't open them up. We just knew they didn't have any heat signatures. But it was an extensive process for the wrecker service that did this cleanup. All the batteries that were in the damaged barrels that actually did have the thermal event, they actually, I think, had to soak for a 10-day sit before they could even repackage them into cell block and the individual bags to make them safe. The ones that weren't involved in the incident were able to be cleared a little quicker than, I think they said, a week, maybe 7 to 10 days, and they were able to be moved back to the recycling plant where the actual load initiated from.
Was all this done at the Flying J in the parking lot, or were
It
you?
was, yeah, we sectioned off the parking lot, which fortunately for us, it was on the end. So it was a large portion of the parking lot, but it was an area that they didn't necessarily have to have. But we moved everything to the very end. So we were just isolating that particular area. And it was a fairly significant work area that ended up having, when we unloaded it, or when the Wrecker Service unloaded it, and they had all these barrels, they all had to be opened. Everything we went through, or they went through, to repackage and then soak in new barrels with the brine solution. And then each battery, one at a time, they ended up having to go through individual Ziploc bags or plastic bags to isolate them, and then repackage them one at a time, and then put the cell block with the vented barrels.
So your time on scene, was it about a day?
Believe it or not, it was less than that.
Okay.
This incident, although it was a very significant incident, was extremely easy for us, for the fire service. It was very easy. So we got there, we saw what we had. Like I said, we deployed the blitz nozzle on the undamaged barrels, and we let the ones that were in the thermal event burn off. All of those barrels completely burned. We had no more flaming event after about an hour. Now, we were still getting really high tick readings, for a couple of hours after all the flames were suppressed or when extinguished. But we probably, I would say fire department probably cleared that scene in 4 or 5 hours, maybe.
Okay. And the cleanup service was probably another 2 weeks.
Yeah, it was an extensive amount of time for them.
Yeah.
It was a really big event for them to clean up.
I don't think people realize what's involved in cleaning up the batteries, because just by the DOT standard, it's one battery cell in a plastic bag in a container with non-flammable.
Yep.
So you need that special permit to be able to package multiple batteries, which that's what the cell block allows for.
Right, and the permit that they had to get, that was part of the certification process that all of the staff involved in that cleanup had to go through. And if I remember correctly, it was I think he said it was a 4 or 5 hour class that they had to go take from one of the federal agencies to get approved to be able to do the cleanup.
Was just the DOT involved, or was the EPA involved as well?
No, so DOT was there, NTSB, and I believe NHTSA showed up.
Okay.
EPA may have been there. If they were, I don't recall seeing anybody there. That was the first time we've experienced anything like this. Even having a little bit of knowledge at that time on thermal runaway and lithium batteries, I don't know how we would have handled. We probably would have done like most places and probably opened those back doors,
Right.
and then we'd have dealt with what happened at that point. So we were fortunate in how it played out, that the event happened before we got there. So,
Okay.
And the fact that there was just 1 or 2 cars that were exposure vehicles parked next to it, and there wasn't anything else by. It was one of the. It was a significant incident, but it was a lot smaller than it would have been just because of this parking situation, and there was nobody around it.
Appreciate you taking the time to talk about the incident.
Yep, no problem. Appreciate you having me.
Incidents like this really show the increasing risks responders face when dealing with the new technologies. I provide specialized training to help prepare your crew for lithium-ion battery or electric vehicle-related incidents. My lectures are designed to keep emergency personnel safe while responding effectively when it matters most. If you're ready, visit www.stashtraining.com or give me a call to book a training session today. Let's make sure your crews are ready for whatever comes next.